The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched as far as the eye could see. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy sat in curved rows that rose up like a massive bowl. Some had wings, others had tentacles, and many looked nothing like anything found on Earth. The air buzzed with different languages being translated through tiny devices that everyone wore. Sarah Chen stood alone at the center of it all. She was the only human in the entire building. Her dark blue uniform looked simple compared to the glowing robes and crystal armor worn by the other beings around her. But she stood straight and calm, even though she knew what was coming. "The trial of the human species will now conclude," announced the chief judge. The being looked like a giant tree made of silver metal, with glowing eyes scattered across its trunk. Its voice echoed through the hall without any emotion. For 3 days, Sarah had listened to accusations against her people. The Veltar, who looked like walking crystals that sparkled in the light, had led the attack on humanity. Their speaker, Prime Crystal Zexthar, had listed every crime they claimed humans had committed. "The humans expand too fast," Zexthar had said, its crystal body flashing red with anger. "In just 50 years, they have spread to more worlds than most species claim in 500 years. They ignore our rules. They make friends with species we have already judged as primitive. They share their technology with beings who are not ready for it." Sarah remembered every word. The Veltar had shown images of human colonies on dead worlds that the Council had written off as worthless. They showed humans trading with the Zephyrian nomads, a species that most Council members thought of as space pirates. They showed humans teaching farming techniques to the Corvin, even though the Corvin were considered too simple to understand advanced agriculture. "Worst of all," Zexthar had continued, "they question our authority. When we tell them a world cannot be lived on, they prove us wrong. When we say a species is primitive, they show us their hidden talents. The humans make the Council look foolish." Sarah had been allowed to defend her species, but she knew it was just for show. The Council had already made up their minds. Still, she had tried. "We came to the stars to learn and grow," she had told them. "When we found the Zephyrians, we did not see pirates. We saw a people who knew how to survive in the emptiness between stars. When we found dead worlds, we did not see failure. We saw potential. When we met the Corvin, we did not see a primitive species. We saw farmers who had worked with their world for thousands of years." She had paused, looking around the great hall. "We thought that was what the Galactic Council wanted. We thought you invited us here to share what we had learned and to learn from others. We thought the galaxy was big enough for many different ways of living." But her words had fallen on deaf ears. The Council wanted order, not innovation. They wanted species to stay in their assigned roles, not to grow and change. Humans were too unpredictable, too willing to break rules, too eager to help others break rules too. Now came the vote. Sarah watched as lights appeared above each section of the hall. Green meant the species voted to let humans stay in the Council. Red meant they voted to throw humans out. Blue meant they chose not to vote. The lights began to appear. Red, red, red. A few green lights scattered here and there, but they were quickly drowned out by the sea of red. Sarah counted them automatically, even though she knew what the result would be. "The vote is complete," announced the chief judge. 731 species vote for expulsion, 116 vote against. 0 abstentions. The human species is hereby expelled from the Galactic Council. A cheer went up from many parts of the hall. The Veltar crystals flashed bright white with joy. Other species made sounds of approval in their own languages. They had removed the troublemakers. Order would return to the galaxy. Sarah noticed that the species who had voted to keep humans were not cheering. The Corvin delegation sat with their heads bowed. The few Zephyrian representatives who had been allowed to attend looked angry. Even some species Sarah had never worked with closely seemed uncomfortable with the result. The human species has one standard galactic year to remove all colonies, stations and citizens from Council-controlled space. The chief judge continued. All trade agreements are void. All technology sharing agreements are canceled. All diplomatic relations are ended. Sarah stepped forward. The hall grew quiet, waiting to hear humanity beg for mercy or time. Instead, she smiled. "Thank you for your decision," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the translation devices. "We understand that our ways do not fit with yours. We accept your judgment," murmurs rippled through the crowd. This was not the reaction they had expected. "We will be gone from Council space in 6 months, not 12. Sarah continued. "We would not want to cause you any more trouble than we already have." She turned to leave, then stopped and looked back. "Before we go, we want to thank the 116 species who voted for us. Your friendship has meant everything to humanity. We hope we will see you again someday." Sarah walked toward the exit. As she moved, something unexpected happened. Representatives from the Corvin delegation stood up and followed her. Then the Zephyrians rose and walked after her too. Soon, beings from dozens of different species were leaving their seats and walking behind the human ambassador. The chief judge's voice boomed across the hall. "The council session is not over. Return to your seats," but the exodus continued. Over 100 different species sent representatives walking after Sarah Chen. They were species that the council had always considered minor players. Too small, too poor, or too primitive to matter much. But they were walking away together. Sarah reached the great doors of the council hall. She turned one last time to face the remaining delegates. "To those who stay, we wish you well. The galaxy is vast and there is room for all of us. Perhaps someday we will meet again as friends." The doors closed behind her with a sound like thunder. In the hall, the remaining delegates sat in uncomfortable silence. Prime Crystal Zexthar flashed with satisfaction. "The Chaos Bringers are gone," it announced. "Now we can return to proper order." But Crixth of the Hegemony, an ancient species known for their wisdom, remained troubled. The six-armed being had voted against expelling the humans, and now it wondered if they had just made a terrible mistake. "What if we needed their chaos?" Crixth whispered to its aide. "What if their different way of thinking was helping us solve problems we did not even know we had?" The aide, young and eager to please the council majority, dismissed the concern. "The galaxy worked fine before the humans came. It will work fine after they leave." But as the great hall slowly emptied, Crixth could not shake the feeling that they had just thrown away something precious. The humans had been different, yes. They had broken rules and challenged traditions. But they had also brought energy and new ideas to a galaxy that had grown comfortable with old ways. 6 months seemed like a long time. Crixth hoped it would be long enough to discover whether removing the humans had been wisdom or the greatest mistake the council had ever made. As the last delegates filed out of the hall, the building felt strangely empty. The humans were not even gone yet, but somehow their absence was already being felt. The galaxy was about to learn what it really meant to live without the troublemakers who had dared to dream of something better. 6 months after the council vote, the human exodus began, but it was nothing like what the council expected to see. They thought humans would panic, beg for more time, or try to hide in forgotten corners of space. Instead, what happened was so organized and efficient that it left council observers confused and worried. Captain Reyes stood on the bridge of the cargo ship, New Horizon, as it finished loading the last supplies from Kepler Station. Through the wide windows, she could see dozens of other human ships doing the same thing. Some were massive cargo vessels carrying entire factories. Others were sleek passenger ships filled with families. A few were strange-looking ships that seemed to have been built just for this move. "That's the last of the hydroponic equipment," reported her first officer, Lieutenant Park. "The Corvin farming specialists are already on board the transport ships." Captain Reyes nodded. "What about the fusion reactors?" "Engineering teams finished removing them 3 hours ago. The station's power output will drop by 60% once we're gone." This was happening all across council space. On every world where humans had settled, they were taking everything with them. Not just their personal belongings, but every improvement they had made. Every piece of technology they had installed. Every system they had built. On the mining world of Zerion 7th, human engineers carefully removed the biomechanical pumps they had designed to keep the deep mines from flooding. The Veltar owners of the mines watched nervously but said nothing. They had wanted the humans gone, after all. In the agricultural systems around Ceres Prime, human farming specialists packed up their soil treatment equipment and seed banks. The alien farmers who had learned human techniques tried to convince them to stay, but the humans shook their heads sadly. "The council was very clear," they said. "We have to go." But the strangest thing was who else was leaving. The Corvin, who had been dismissed by the council as simple farmers, were packing up entire settlements. The Zephyrian trade fleets were abandoning routes they had used for decades. Dozens of other species were shutting down their operations and preparing to move. Crixth of the Hegemony watched the departures from the observation deck of Council Central Station. The six-armed being had requested this assignment specifically to see what the humans were really doing. What it saw made it more worried with each passing day. "These are not refugees," Crixith said to its aide. "Look at their ships. Look at their organization. They have been planning this for months, maybe years." The aide looked through the telescope at a massive ship that was unlike anything in the Council database. It was easily 5 kilometers long, with strange bulges and extensions that suggested it was designed to carry entire populations. "Where did they get ships like that?" "They built them," Crixith replied grimly. "The humans have been building evacuation ships while we thought they were just expanding normally. They were preparing for this possibility long before the trial. More ships appeared every day, not just human vessels but ships from dozens of other species. The Corvin arrived in converted farming ships that had been redesigned for long-distance travel. The Zephyrians brought their entire nomad fleet. Other species showed up in ships that looked like they had been modified in human shipyards. The most disturbing sight was the children. Crixith had expected to see frightened families being forced from their homes. Instead, the human children seemed excited. They talked about the new frontier and exploring beyond the rim. They acted like this was an adventure, not a punishment. How can they be happy about being exiled? The aide asked. Crixith did not answer, but it was beginning to understand. The humans were not being punished. They were being freed. Ambassador Chen stood on the command deck of the largest ship in the human fleet. The vessel was called Horizon's End, and it had been built in secret over the past 2 years. It was not just a ship. It was a mobile city, capable of supporting 1 million people for decades. "Final count, Ambassador," reported Admiral Santos. "We have successfully evacuated all human colonies from Council space. Total population, 4 billion humans. Additionally, we are carrying representatives from 89 allied species, totaling approximately 600 million additional beings." Chen nodded. "What about our installations? All human-built infrastructure has been removed or shut down. We left behind nothing that could be used without our maintenance. The hydroponic farms, the mining equipment, the communication networks, all gone. And our friends? The Corvin have decided to come with us entirely. All 47 of their colony worlds are being evacuated. The Zephyrians are bringing their complete trade network. 21 other species are relocating their entire populations. The rest are sending substantial portions of their people and knowledge." Chen walked to the main display, which showed a map of the galaxy. The bright core represented Council space, where billions of beings continued their orderly lives. But now there was a stream of ships heading toward the Dark Rim, where no Council species had ever bothered to explore. "The Council thinks they are throwing out troublemakers," Chen said. "They have no idea they are creating something new." Behind her, Admiral Santos smiled grimly. "Should we tell them about the other colonies?" Chen shook her head. "Not yet. Let them figure out what they have lost first. Then we will see if they are interested in talking." She was referring to a secret that humanity had kept for 20 years. While the Council had been busy cataloging the human colonies they knew about, humans had been quietly settling worlds beyond the rim. There were already 300 human settlements in unexplored space, along with allies from dozens of species who had joined them over the years. The exodus was not humanity fleeing into exile. It was humanity going home. "Signal the fleet," Chen ordered. "We are moving to Phase 2. Across the vast collection of ships, new coordinates were distributed. They were not heading for the nearest empty space as the Council expected. They were heading for a specific location that humans had been preparing for decades. In Council space, the first problems were already beginning. On Kepler Station, the power grid was failing. The human-designed fusion reactors had been so integrated into the station's systems that removing them caused cascading failures. Emergency power could only support basic life support. The station's administrator, a proud member of the Veltar crystal species, sent an angry message to the Council. "The humans sabotaged our station before they left." But Crixith, who was still watching from the observation deck, knew better. The humans had not sabotaged anything. They had simply taken back what was theirs. The problem was that the station had become dependent on human technology without anyone realizing it. Similar reports were coming in from across Council space. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for decades were suddenly having problems. Food production was dropping on agricultural worlds. Mining operations were shutting down due to equipment failures. How did this happen so quickly? Demanded Prime Crystal Zexthar during an emergency council session. Crixith had the answer, but it was not one the council wanted to hear. The humans were not just living among us. They were holding us together. Their technology, their methods, their knowledge, it had become part of our infrastructure. We expelled them without understanding how much we depended on them. The chief judge's silver form trembled with what might have been anger or fear. You are saying we made a mistake? I am saying, Crixth replied carefully, that we may have just discovered what the humans really meant to our civilization, and they are not coming back. In the dark space beyond the galactic rim, the human fleet moved steadily toward their destination. Behind them, the lights of council space grew dimmer. Ahead lay the unknown, filled with possibilities that the council had never bothered to explore. Chen stood at the window of her ship and smiled. For the first time in 50 years, humanity was truly free to be itself. The galaxy was about to learn what humans could accomplish when they were not trying to fit into someone else's idea of order. The real journey was just beginning. 3 months after the humans left, the Galactic Council faced its first real crisis since the war with the Kryn Empire 800 years ago. But this time the enemy was not an alien invasion. It was the slow collapse of their own civilization. Administrator Velkoth stood in the control room of Kepler Station, staring at screens full of red warning lights. The proud hegemony official had run the galaxy's most important trading hub for 15 years without any major problems. Now everything was falling apart. Sir, we have another cascade failure in Sector 7, reported his aide, a nervous young being from the Thrint species. That is the 4th power grid collapse this week. Velkoth's forearms moved frantically across the control panels, trying to reroute power from the remaining functioning systems. How many ships are waiting for docking clearance? 2,000 and counting, sir. The automated docking system cannot handle the traffic without the main computers. Ships are backing up all the way to the Proxima Junction. This was happening because the humans had taken their fusion reactors when they left. Those reactors had not just provided power. They had run the computers that managed station operations. The backup systems that the station fell back on were older, slower, and could not handle the complex calculations needed to manage galactic trade. But Kepler Station was just the beginning. Reports were flooding in from across council space about systems failing, operations shutting down, and carefully organized structures collapsing. On Ceres Prime, the agricultural center that fed 17 systems, Director Zaxine watched his food production numbers with growing panic. The Moltar had been proud of their advanced hydroponic farms, which produced more food per square meter than any other method in the galaxy. The yield from Sector 12 is down 70%, his agricultural specialist reported. The crops are diseased, and the automatic systems cannot identify the problem. Director Zaxine's tentacles twisted with frustration. Run a diagnostic on the growing systems. We have, sir. Multiple times. The systems report that they are functioning normally, but the crops keep dying. The problem was that the humans had quietly improved the farming systems over the past 5 years. They had introduced something they called companion planting, where different crops helped each other grow. They had modified the soil with bacterial cultures that prevented disease. They had even adjusted the timing of when different plants were harvested so that the soil stayed healthy. The automated hydroponic system still worked perfectly, but they did not understand these human improvements. Without the human agricultural specialist to guide them, the systems were running programs that actually made the crops sick. Similar disasters were unfolding everywhere. In the Zerian system, the largest mining operation in the galaxy had shut down completely. The Veltar Corporation that owned the mines had been forced to evacuate their workers when the deep shafts began flooding. Prime Executive Zorthak stood at the edge of the flooded main shaft, watching millions of credits worth of equipment disappear under the rising water. The crystal being's body flickered with colors that indicated extreme anger and confusion. How did this happen? Zorthak demanded. These mines have operated for 300 years without flooding. The chief engineer, a nervous Veltar technician, consulted his datapad. Sir, the pumping systems are working normally. All diagnostics show green, but the water level keeps rising. What the engineer did not understand was that humans had solved a critical problem 2 years earlier. The deep mines had been slowly sinking due to geological instability. Human engineers had installed a network of biomechanical supports that adjusted constantly to prevent cave-ins. They had also installed specialized pumps that worked with the planet's natural water table instead of fighting against it. When the humans left, they had taken their biomechanical systems with them. Now the mines were collapsing into the underground rivers that the humans had been carefully managing. No amount of traditional pumping could stop the flood, but the most serious problem was happening at the edges of Council space. Flight Commander Krixtal of the Border Defense Force stared at her scanner displays with growing alarm. For 2 weeks, the early warning network had been sending confusing signals. Ships were appearing and disappearing without explanation. Entire sections of the sensor grid were going dark. "Commander, we are getting another false alarm from Sector 91, reported her communications officer. "The automated systems say there is a fleet of unknown ships, but when we send scouts, they find nothing." Commander Krixtal's scaled face showed her confusion.
How many false alarms is that this week?
47, sir. But also 3 missed contacts that our patrol ships discovered by accident. This was the most dangerous failure of all. The galaxy's early warning system depended on a network of sensor stations that watched for threats from unexplored space. But that network had been maintained by Corvin technicians, who had been considered so unimportant that the Council barely noticed when they left with the humans. The Corvin had a natural ability to interpret quantum sensor data that even the most advanced computers could not match. They could tell the difference between a space whale and a warship from half a galaxy away. They could spot cloaked vessels and identify threats that showed up only as tiny irregularities in the data. Without them, the sensor network was producing mountains of data that no one could properly interpret. Automated systems were reporting phantom fleets while missing real dangers. The Border Defense Force was flying blind at the worst possible time. In the council chambers, an emergency session was underway. The Great Hall was only half full, as many species were dealing with their own crisis situations. Those who were present looked worried and confused. "The situation is becoming critical," reported Crixith of the Hegemony. The 6-armed being had been put in charge of investigating the growing problems. "We have system failures on 412 worlds. Trade volume is down 60%. Food production has dropped by 40% in the affected agricultural zones." Prime Crystal Zexthar, who had led the prosecution against humanity, flickered with angry red light. "This cannot all be due to the departure of one primitive species. There must be sabotage involved." "There is no sabotage," Crixth replied firmly. "We have investigated thoroughly. The humans took only what belonged to them and fulfilled all their obligations under council law. The problem is that we did not realize how much of our infrastructure depended on their contributions." The Chief Judge's silver form leaned forward. "Explain." Crixth activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy. Red dots appeared across the map, indicating systems experiencing failures. The humans were not just living among us. They were fixing problems, small problems that we did not even notice. A more efficient power coupling here, a better trade route there, an improved growing technique, a new way to interpret sensor data. More red dots appeared as Crixth continued. They shared these improvements freely, and we integrated them into our systems without thinking about it. We became dependent on human knowledge and expertise without realizing it. The display now showed that nearly every major system in council space was affected in some way. The humans were acting as a problem-solving network for our entire civilization. When they left, they took that network with them. Silence fell over the chamber. Finally, a delegate from the Altani Commonwealth spoke up. "Can we reverse the damage? Can we recreate what they did?" Crixith's report was devastating. "We are trying. But the humans had 50 years to integrate their solutions into our systems. They worked with dozens of different species, learning from each one and combining different approaches. We do not even have complete records of what they changed, much less how to maintain it. How long until we can fix these problems ourselves?" asked another delegate. "Best estimate?" Crixith paused. 50 to 100 years. If we can figure out how they did it at all." The chamber erupted in shocked voices and angry shouts. Species that had voted to expel humanity were now demanding to know why no one had warned them about this possibility. But Crixith was not finished. "There is something else. Something worse." The 6-armed being activated another display. 3 days ago, our deep space monitors detected movement in the void beyond the galaxy. Something large is approaching from the direction of the Magellanic Clouds. A new series of dots appeared on the display, but these were moving. The signals are consistent with artificial constructs of enormous size. Multiple contacts moving in coordinated patterns. Whatever it is, it will reach the galactic rim in approximately 1 year. The chamber fell silent again. Everyone remembered the stories of the last time something had come from the void between galaxies. It had not ended well for anyone. "Do we know what it is?" asked the chief judge. "Not yet," Crixith admitted. "But given our current sensor problems, we may not know until it is too late. We expelled the humans just when we needed their ability to solve impossible problems the most." As the session adjourned in chaos, one question hung in the air that no one wanted to ask. What if the humans had seen this coming? What if their aggressive expansion had not been random ambition, but preparation for something the Council had never even considered? The galaxy was about to learn what it meant to face the unknown without the species there. 6 months after the humans left, Crixith finished reading the most disturbing report in galactic history. The six-armed being sat alone in its private office, surrounded by datapads, holographic displays, and files that painted a picture of just how badly the Council had misunderstood humanity. The investigation had taken 3 months and involved teams of researchers from 200 different species. What they had discovered was so shocking that Crixith had read the final report 5 times to make sure it was not a mistake. The humans had not been chaotic troublemakers disrupting galactic order. They had been the invisible foundation holding galactic civilization together. Crixith activated the main display and began to review the evidence once more. The first section dealt with infrastructure integration. Human-designed improvements had been found in the critical systems of over 400 worlds. Power grids, transportation networks, communication systems, food production facilities, all had been quietly enhanced with human innovations. They did not ask for credit, Crixith murmured to itself. They just saw problems and fixed them. The second section was even more revealing. It detailed something the research team had called the competence network. Humans had been systematically identifying species that the Council had dismissed as unimportant, then helping them develop their natural abilities. The Corvan were the perfect example. The Council had classified them as simple agricultural workers with limited technological aptitude. But humans had discovered that Corvan brains processed quantum information in ways that no computer could match. With human encouragement and training, the Corvan had become the galaxy's most skilled sensor technicians and data analysts. The Zephyrians were another case. The Council had labeled them as nomadic traders with primitive technology. Humans had realized that their nomadic lifestyle had given them an unmatched understanding of space currents, gravitational fields, and the hidden paths between stars. With human-provided navigation tools, the Zephyrians had created the most efficient trade network in galactic history. Crixith scrolled through dozens of similar examples. Species after species that the Council had written off as unimportant had been quietly developed by humans into specialists who were essential to galactic civilization. The third section of the report dealt with problem-solving patterns. The research team had analyzed every major crisis that had been resolved in the past 50 years. In 73% of cases, the final solution had either been suggested by humans or developed with significant human input. They see problems differently, Crixith read from the report. Where Council species see established systems that should not be changed, humans see opportunities for improvement. Where we see separate issues, they see connected patterns. Where we see acceptable losses, they see problems that must be solved. The fourth section was the most troubling. It dealt with expansion patterns and threat assessment. The research team had mapped every human colony and compared their locations to potential threat vectors from outside the galaxy. What they found was that human expansion had not been random at all. Humans had been systematically settling worlds along the galactic rim, creating a buffer zone of inhabited systems between Council space and the vast emptiness beyond. They had been preparing for threats that the Council had never even considered. Crixith stood up and walked to the large window that looked out over the Council homeworld. The planet was beautiful, with soaring crystal cities and carefully maintained gardens. It was the symbol of galactic order and civilization, but now Crixith wondered if that order had been an illusion, maintained by the chaotic energy of a species the Council had thrown away. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Crixith activated the display and saw the concerned face of Admiral Vectar from Border Defense Command. "Investigator Crixith, we have an urgent update on the deep space contacts," the Admiral said. "You need to see this immediately." The display switched to a tactical screen showing the edge of galactic space. What Crixith saw made its 6 hearts skip beats. The unknown contacts were no longer just moving dots. The enhanced sensors had finally gotten clear readings and the results were terrifying. "What am I looking at?" Crixith asked, though it was beginning to suspect the answer. "Machine constructs," Admiral Vectar replied grimly. "Hundreds of them, each one the size of a small moon. They are moving in perfect formation and consuming everything in their path. Asteroid fields, gas clouds, even small planets. Everything is being converted into more machines." Crixith felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air temperature. "The Devourers. They have returned. Every species in the galaxy knew the stories. 3 galactic cycles ago, machine intelligences from the void between galaxies had swept through this region of space. They had consumed entire civilizations, converting all organic and inorganic matter into copies of themselves. Only the combined effort of every species in the galaxy had finally stopped them, and the cost had been enormous. How long until they reach inhabited systems?" Crixith asked. "At their current speed, approximately 10 months, the Admiral replied. "Maybe less if they continue to accelerate." The display zoomed in on one of the machine constructs. It looked like a sphere covered in mechanical tentacles, each one capable of stripping a planet down to its core. Around it, smaller machines swarmed like insects, breaking down matter and feeding it back to the main construct. "Admiral, what is our current defensive capability against this threat?" Admiral Vectar's expression was grim. "Minimal. Our fleets are designed to fight other civilizations, not self-replicating machines. The Devourers do not negotiate, they do not retreat, and they do not stop. They simply consume until there is nothing left." Crixith closed its eyes and thought about the human expansion patterns it had just been studying. The humans had been settling worlds along the exact path the Devourers were now taking. It could not be a coincidence. "Admiral, I need you to check something for me. Compare the Devourer approach vector with the locations of human colonies before they left." There was a pause as the Admiral ran the comparison. When the results appeared, both beings stared at the display in shock. Every single human colony had been positioned to provide early warning and defensive coverage against threats approaching from that exact direction. "They knew," Crixith whispered. "Somehow the humans knew this was coming." The Admiral's voice was barely audible. "How is that possible? The Devourers have been gone for over 2,000 years. Crixith thought about everything it had learned about human problem-solving methods. Humans study patterns. They look at history and try to predict what might happen next. What if they analyzed the Devourer attacks and calculated when they might return? And they expanded to meet the threat," the Admiral finished. "While we thought they were just being aggressive, they were actually preparing to defend the galaxy." A new display activated showing current human positions. But instead of the scattered refugees the Council expected to see, the tracking data showed something impossible. Human ships were not fleeing toward the galactic core. They were moving toward the Devourer fleet. "Investigator," Admiral Vectar said slowly, "I am reading human ships along the entire contact front, not just a few scouts. Thousands of ships. They are positioning themselves between the Devourers and Council space." Crixith felt a mixture of hope and shame. Open a communication channel to the human fleet. Use all frequencies. "Sir, we have been trying to contact them for months. They have not responded to any Council transmissions. Try again. Tell them—" Crixith paused, thinking about what message might reach the species they had expelled. "Tell them the Council knows they were right. Tell them we are sorry. Tell them we need their help." The transmission went out across the void, carrying with it the Council's first admission that they had made a terrible mistake. For long minutes there was no response. Then, a voice came back across the darkness, a familiar voice that Crixith remembered from the trial 6 months ago. "This is Ambassador Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Coalition," the transmission said. "We received your message, Investigator Crixith. We are currently engaged with advanced elements of the Devourer fleet. Stand by for tactical data." The display filled with information that made Crixith's breathing stop. Battle reports, tactical analyses, and fleet positions painted a picture of humanity, engaged in massive combat operations against the machines. They were not running away. They were fighting. Ambassador Chen, Crixith transmitted back. The Council needs to know. How long have you been preparing for this? Chen's reply came with a sound that might have been laughter. Investigator. We started preparing for this war the day we joined the galactic community 50 years ago. We tried to tell you, but you called it aggressive expansion. We tried to show you, but you called it chaos. Now the war is here, and you are going to learn what humans do when the galaxy needs saving. As the transmission ended, Crixith realized that everything the Council thought they knew about humanity had been wrong. They had not expelled troublemakers. They had expelled their protectors. And now, with the Devourers bearing down on galactic civilization, they could only hope that the humans would still be willing to save. 1 year after humanity's expulsion from the Galactic Council, the Devourer fleet reached the galactic rim. What should have been the beginning of the end for galactic civilization became something else entirely. The moment when the galaxy learned what humans had really been preparing for. Admiral Santos stood on the bridge of the battleship, Terra's Vengeance, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. Around her, the largest human fleet ever assembled hung in space like a deadly constellation. But these were not the same ships the Council had seen leaving galactic space a year ago. "Ma'am, we have confirmation from all battle groups," reported Commander Martinez from the tactical station. "The Corvin sensor teams are tracking over 300 Devourer constructs. All human forces are in position." "What about our allies?" Santos asked. "The Zephyrian strike fleets are ready for hit-and-run operations. The Corvin data analysis teams are integrated with all our command ships. The Volgan Engineering Corps has finished installing the new weapon systems. All allied forces report ready for combat." Santos nodded with pride. The past year had not been spent in exile. It had been spent in preparation for this exact moment. While the Council had been dealing with the collapse of their infrastructure, humanity and their allies had been building a war machine specifically designed to fight the Devourers. The ships surrounding Terra's Vengeance looked nothing like the vessels that had left Council space. They were larger, more heavily armed, and covered with technologies that the Council had never seen. Weapon systems based on Zephyrian energy manipulation, armor plating designed with Corvin quantum mathematics, shield generators that used principles discovered by a dozen different species working together. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from Council space," reported the communications officer. "It's Admiral Vectar from Border Defense Command." "Put him through." The display activated to show the worried face of the Council military commander. Behind him, Santos could see the chaos of a command center dealing with an impossible situation. "Admiral Santos, thank you for responding," Vectar said. "Our scouts report that the Devourer advance elements have been stopped along a 40-light-year front." "Are your forces responsible for this?" Santos smiled grimly. "We are holding the line, Admiral." "But the main Devourer fleet is still 3 days out. The real fight has not started yet. How is this possible?" Council intelligence estimates that the Devourer force is 10 times larger than anything the galaxy faced in the previous invasion. "How can human forces stop them?" "Because we learned from history," Santos replied. "The previous invasion was defeated by every species working together. We just skipped the part where you spend decades arguing about it first." She gestured to the tactical display. "Admiral, what you are seeing is not just a human fleet. This is humanity plus every species that the Council dismissed as unimportant. The Corvin are providing data analysis that lets us predict Devourer movements before they make them. The Zephyrians are using their knowledge of space currents to hit the enemy where they are weakest. 47 other species are contributing their unique abilities to this fight." Admiral Vectar looked stunned. "How did you coordinate all of this? How did you even know where to be?" "We have been tracking the Devourers for 20 years, Santos explained. "Human deep space probes detected the first signs of their return when I was still a junior officer. We tried to warn the Council, but you said we were being paranoid. So we prepared on our own." The display switched to show the battle zone. Human ships were engaging Devourer constructs in a carefully choreographed dance of destruction. But what was most impressive was how the different species worked together. Corvin sensor ships fed targeting data to human gunships. Zephyrian raiders used their speed to draw enemy fire away from human heavy cruisers. Other allied ships provided support in ways that played to their unique strengths. "This is why we expanded so aggressively," Santos continued. "Every human colony was positioned to provide early warning and defensive coverage. Every species we befriended was chosen because they had abilities we would need for this war. We were not being chaotic, Admiral. We were being human. Suddenly, alarms began sounding throughout both ships. The main Devourer fleet had arrived. Santos watched the tactical display as hundreds of massive constructs emerged from hyperspace. Each one was the size of a small moon, covered in mechanical arms that could strip planets down to their cores. Around them, thousands of smaller machines swarmed like deadly insects. "All ships, this is Admiral Santos," she broadcast to the human fleet. "Execute Battle Plan Omega. Show them what happens when you mess with Earth's children." What followed was unlike any battle in galactic history. The humans did not try to match the Devourers in raw firepower. Instead, they used tactics that no ordered civilization would have thought of. Human ships broke formation and attacked from seemingly random directions. But each attack was carefully coordinated with Allied forces. Corvan ships would identify weak points in Devourer constructs. Then Zephyrian raiders would exploit those weaknesses, while human gunships provided covering fire. When Devourer machines tried to swarm human positions, they found that their targets had disappeared and reappeared somewhere else entirely. The Zephyrians had taught the humans how to use gravity wells and space currents to move faster than their enemies could track. When the machines tried to overwhelm human defenses with numbers, they discovered that the humans had been expecting this. Hidden weapons platforms, built by Volgan engineers and powered by human fusion technology, emerged from asteroid fields to catch the Devourers in crossfire. Admiral Vectar watched the battle from his command ship, unable to believe what he was seeing. How are they winning? The Devourers have superior numbers and firepower. Crixith, who had joined the Admiral to witness the battle, provided the answer. Because the humans are not fighting like a civilized species. They are fighting like humans. The six-armed being pointed to the tactical display. Look at their tactics. No council species would attack in such a disorganized pattern. But the humans are not being disorganized. They are being unpredictable. The Devourer machines cannot adapt to tactics that follow no logical pattern. As the battle continued, it became clear that humanity was not just holding the line. They were winning. Devourer constructs that had seemed unstoppable were being destroyed by combined attacks from multiple species. The machine swarms that had overwhelmed previous galactic defenses were being outmaneuvered by ships that moved like they were alive. But the most shocking moment came when Ambassador Sarah Chen's voice echoed across all Council communication channels. "Attention, Galactic Council," Chen announced. "This is the Human Defense Coalition. We are currently engaged in protecting galactic civilization from the Devourer invasion. We could use some help." The transmission included tactical data, evacuation procedures, and battle plans. But more importantly, it included an offer. "Any Council species that wants to join this fight is welcome. We will provide you with tactical coordination, target data, and defensive coverage. But you need to understand something. This is not the old way of doing things. If you want to survive this war, you have to be willing to learn from us." Admiral Vectar looked at Crixith. "What do we do?" "We ask for help," Crixith replied. "We admit that we were wrong about humanity, and we ask them to teach us how to save ourselves." Within hours, Council ships were joining the battle. It was chaotic at first. Council forces were used to rigid formations and careful planning. But under human coordination, they began to work as part of something larger. The Veltar crystal ships, with their precise energy weapons, were paired with human targeting systems to create devastating long-range artillery. The Hegemony's heavy cruisers provided defensive screens, while human fighters struck at enemy weak points. Even species that had never fought together before found themselves working as a team. As the battle turned decisively in favor of the Galactic Alliance, Chen made one final transmission to the Council. "This is what we could have been doing all along," she said. "This is what happens when different species work together instead of trying to control each other. The galaxy is big enough for all of us, but only if we remember that our differences make us stronger, not weaker." The Devourer invasion was broken that day. The machine constructs that survived retreated back into the void, defeated by an alliance they could not understand or adapt to. In the aftermath, as human ships worked alongside Council vessels to rescue survivors and rebuild damaged systems, the Galactic Council made a formal request for humanity to return. Chen's response was characteristically simple. "We never really left. We were just waiting for you to realize that the galaxy belongs to all of us. The age of human exile was over. The age of true galactic cooperation had begun.